I'd like to introduce Alyssa Bormas to you. She is a local author from Holy Family Catholic Church in St. Louis Park. Her book, The Catechism of Hockey, looks at how faith and family life can coincide and has been recognized by the Archdiocese. Please welcome Alyssa Bormas.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, okay, that's fine. I'm going to put this in here. I usually try to get places a little early when I'm speaking because having been the person who gets speakers in the past, it's always a little nerve-wracking until you see them walk in the door. So I'm trying to give Gina and everybody here, they can calm down because I showed up on time or early. And I just didn't expect what was going to happen when I walked in hearing Ashley speak. She's remarkable. And I just can't even explain how incredible it was. But just this past Wednesday, I was sitting with a friend who has, she had a stillborn baby as her first baby. They have 8 more kids, 7 of their own and 1 they adopted. And the one, their second youngest has Down syndrome and has nearly died a few times. And I was saying, I want you on my radio show and this other woman, Annie, but it's just not quite perfect yet. I can't figure out what we need. And I walked in here and I hear Ashley talking, oh, that's what we need. So you never know how Jesus is going to show up in a given day. Just Saturday morning in prayer, like, hello, Jesus. And I had no idea I was going to walk into this. So, I was a little, and then plus I'm back there crying. Stop it. Right. It was amazing. What a great story. Well, mine is just a hair different. We're talking about hockey. So hopefully, hopefully it will also be meaningful, but I suspect that maybe there'll be less tears. All right. So my name's Alyssa Bormas, and now I mentioned I have a radio show, so I have to tell you when it's on. I just got it, so it does. I don't have a card or anything with it. I've only had it for 4 weeks. It's with Radio Maria. They're out of, I think, Louisiana. And then they are across the South and up the East Coast, and they're part of Radio Maria worldwide. And I'm on Sundays at 1 o'clock, and you can find me radiomaria.us, and then you just hit listen live. If you miss me, you can go on and get the podcast. So you put Radio Maria and search for me, Alyssa Bormas, and then my show will come up and you can hear the podcast. So anyway, fantastic. Then what else about me? There's always 3 questions. I wrote this book called The Catechism of Hockey, and there's always 3 questions. No, I don't know how to skate. There, I've answered one of them. No, I'm not a hockey mom. And the only reason I picked hockey was because of sin. And we'll get to that in a minute. So here we go. I laugh at my own jokes, by the way. And none of them are very good. So don't worry about waiting for the big joke to laugh. Just laugh at the corny ones, all right? So one night I was laying awake, and I often think about odd things. I know it might come as a surprise, but that's another corny joke. So I was laying awake and wondering, we've heard over and over and over that sports have become a religion, but I've never heard anyone say, why? So that's what I'm wondering about. And it was sort of like, poof, and here you go. And I had the Catechism of Hockey, nearly the full thing. My phone rang, and it was a friend, and she said, guess what? I got engaged. Yeah, that's great news. Well, let me tell you about this. And I gave her the first lecture of the Catechism of Hockey. And after about a half an hour, she had that dazed sound in her voice saying, that the sound is saying, I thought I was the one with the good news. So anyway, off we went. And then I decided to write a book about it. So what is the Catechism of Hockey? The rawest form of hockey, of course, is just a kid on a sheet of ice with a stick, and even if it's a crushed soda can for a puck, and maybe there's 2 sticks in a snowbank that mark off a goal. But if you walk by that kid, you'd know, hey, they're playing hockey, right? Just the rawest form. But hockey is really fun. Not that I know, because I can't skate. I've never played it, but it seems really fun. It's fun to watch. And so, of course, that one child playing, they want another one to come and play, and so on and so forth and everything. Now, even with one kid playing, there are rules. How do we know it's hockey and not football when we walk by? So even with one kid playing, he's still submitting to the rules, oddly enough. Otherwise, it'd be something completely different. Figure skating is similar to hockey because they're both on ice with skates, but they're completely different, right? So this one kid is submitting to the rules, and another kid comes, and now someone's got to, as we get a whole bunch of kids playing hockey, someone has to articulate the rules. And so enter the commissioner and governing body, right? And they should remind you of somebody in a second. They articulate the rules over time, and they tell hockey, in essence, all of hockey, this is how hockey is to be played. The rules, mostly, they stay the same. There's a deposit of faith, this is hockey, but then there's these little changes here and there. I'm going to give you an example. When I was young, there was a couple of you who might have been young at the same time I was. Everybody else looks younger. But when I was young, I could remember professional hockey players that didn't wear helmets. But of course, science helped us along a little bit, and we know a little bit more about the cranium and brain injuries and the dangers of not wearing a helmet on a sheet of ice, especially playing at that level. And so the commissioner and governing body took all this into account, the science of the day, and they said, now everybody has to play with a helmet. There's not anyone who plays hockey now that doesn't have a helmet on, right? And the 5-year-old doesn't need to know why they have a helmet on. Put it on, kid, it's part of the uniform. Okay. I'm sure they don't even really question it, because if you're a hockey player, it has a helmet on, right? It just is. But the commissioner and governing body took information, current scientific information, and articulated the rules. They didn't change hockey. They articulated the rules. This is exactly what the magisterium does. The bishops, in union with the Pope, take into account all of everything, including scientific information, and articulate the deposit of faith of the church. They aren't changing anything. They're just articulating it. Why does the commissioner and governing body in hockey articulate it? Because hockey's for life. You're not just to play hockey one day. You're to play hockey every day for your whole life. It's a way of life, right? I'm a hockey player, right? I'm not. But that's what our kid, oh yeah, I'm a hockey player. You could probably ask that of your children. I'm a hockey player. I'm a piano player. I'm a football player. I'm a dancer. It's a way of life. The commissioner and governing body just help it be about life. That's what the magisterium does, is that the teachings from them are about life. Okay, so we send our kids off to, we've been teaching them at home, which is great. Most often, the first teachers of hockey are the parents, but we eventually send them off to the disciples of hockey, the coaches. And this is a little something I want you to pay attention to. We send them to the coaches ready to learn, ready to listen, ready to behave, ready to believe, and ready to act. We never would think, I don't think it's happened. I'll ask kids, I've never heard that there's even been a rumor of it, of someone having their cell phone and texting on the ice. Right? It doesn't happen. It's not part of hockey. I mean, can you imagine if it did happen, if there's one kid texting on the ice when they're with the coach, and first of all, there's going to be a correction. Does anyone know what Herbies are? Herbies are this terrible wind sprint sort of thing, running but on ice skates with all your equipment on, running up a part of the rink, coming back, running further, or skating. And they're named after Herb Brooks, the coach of the 1980 Olympic team, and of course, he's most famous for that. There's this horrific exercise named for him, Herbies, and it's to wear the kids out, right? And it's a strengthening exercise, and but it's just going to beat you up. So if we had one kid on the ice texting, you can imagine that the whole team is going to be doing Herbies because the one kid had a cell phone and was texting. You can imagine that this is seen as an insult to the coach, to the team, and frankly to all of hockey. How rude. Where do you get off, kid, doing this, right? And not only now is there the correction from the coach to all of the players for one offending. There's no private sin in hockey. But also, you can imagine when these kids get off the field and probably under their breath as they're doing the sprints, we're going to keep trying to get near this kid to under our breath tell him, I cannot believe you did that, the other players. And then the filial correction in the locker room from the kids to that one kid. And then the parents in the stands, let's say they're carpooling that night. And so they got in the car and it's not necessarily their parent, but you can imagine that parent say, wow, I cannot believe you did that. Oh yeah, I already let your parents know that you texted on the ice. Yeah, they know when you get home. And you know when you get home and that parent is standing there. Do you want to explain what you did? You were texting on the ice? Do you know how insulting that is? Not only to your coach, not only to the team, but to all of hockey. Do you know that I send you there because I want something more of you? Right? Yeah, of course, he made you all do Herbies ad nauseum. Of course, but now the discipline isn't over. That was just the discipline from the coach. And you're going to have to take your buddies telling you about it for a while, but I'm going to tell you about it right now. The phone is gone. The neighbor lady, she's 80. She needs her driveway shoveled all winter for free. And probably in the spring she's going to need help getting the windows clean or right? This is a big deal. All of hockey comes together. The teachers, the disciples, the parents, the filial correction of the team for one offender. When we send our children to be taught the faith, having been a person who teaches children the faith, if I take away a phone, I'm the offender. If I have to talk to a parent, I'm the one who is out of line. If it gets escalated to father, can't you find a different way, right? Often the catechist isn't backed up. We have our children do Herbies in hockey, and we have them do one person offends, everybody does them. There should be spiritual Herbies, right? You need to send your children to be ready, just like they are for hockey. To be ready to listen, behave, believe, and act. Hockey is great. It's for life. It's fantastic. The faith is more important. We have to send our children ready. They may not use cell phones in their catechist, with their catechist. They may not use them on a retreat. They may not use them in church, right? All right, rules. There's one rule. There's rules on and off the ice. We always forget about the off-ice rules, so let's talk about those first. We forget that at the beginning of the season, we make a commitment to hockey, and we get the schedule, and it says that you have these certain games and certain practices, and those are all mandatory. But of course, ice time is hard to get a hold of, and we're going to keep seeking ways where we can find ice time. And when we find another ice time, then that's going to be mandatory as well. Even if it's just an afternoon's notice, it's still mandatory. Figure it out, you know. And then the other thing is there'll be a tournament that we qualify for, and that's mandatory. And then we'll win another game there, and then that tournament is mandatory. All these things are mandatory. And if you miss a practice, usually you sit out a period of hockey for the next game. If you miss a game, you suit up and sit out the whole game the next time because it's all mandatory. So let me get this straight. There's a regular season that's mandatory, and regular games and practice is mandatory. There's things that just pop up in the schedule and they're mandatory, right? And oddly enough, in hockey, they all come with an envelope, if you know what I'm saying, is that you have to tithe to hockey. And many of us hemorrhage to hockey, right? It's way more than tithing, sacrificial giving. And so there's a regular season that's mandatory, some things that pop up in the schedule that are mandatory. Sundays, by the way, are mandatory. And holy days of obligation are mandatory. And oddly enough, they come with an envelope in a certain sense. You can certainly go without paying. But we gladly tithe to hockey. Just imagine if we put in the envelope what we paid for the extra ice time this season, that everything in hockey, the sticks that were broken, the skate sharpening, if we just put that in our envelope for church, right? If you just flip those. Or maybe we didn't begrudge the church something, right? So we tithe to hockey. These the other rules off the ice, you have to do with the schedule, getting there on time. I love this because you have to get to a game usually 45 minutes early, but the kids love to stand around and talk to each other, so they want an extra 15 minutes on it. And so they're the ones counting back. When you know you have a 7 o'clock game, they know there's a 20-minute drive, only there's traffic, so it's probably going to be 40 minutes. And we have to get there at an hour before. So it's 7 o'clock, so I need to be there at 6, but there's an hour, 40 minutes of traffic, and you're not ready. And the kid is the one telling you, come on, let's get in the car and go, right? They have all their equipment together. Let's go. Because they're bought in. They're all in. And then they have fellowship time, and then they warm up their body and soul to be ready for the sacrifice of the game. Now, imagine if we got to church early. Weird. I know it's weird. But I got here early this morning, and look what happened. I had my own retreat this morning. It was fantastic. So, and now I guess for a radio show. Radio Maria, 1 o'clock Sundays. Anyway. But imagine if we did this, that we had them so into their faith, that they were the ones saying, hey, we got to get to church early. Because first, maybe there's some fellowship time. You run into someone in the parking lot, you chat a little bit, but then you go in and you kneel down and you get your physical and spiritual self ready. So at the sacrifice of the Mass, which is when the first person starts coming down, well, actually when the music plays, right? When the first part of the procession begins, you're ready. You're not just sneaking in, you're ready. Our kids are begging us to get to hockey. It's our job to get them to beg to go to church. We'll keep going on how that happens. Anyway, now, rules on the ice. This is the best part. Right here. I love this part. I love to talk about how much I love my speech. Anyway, and my book, by the way, $14.95. So, rules on the ice. This is the obvious part why we had to use hockey for the Catechism of hockey. When you have a penalty on the ice, there are major and minor penalties. And when you get one, you go to the box. It's fantastic. Major, minor, go to the box. Come on, that's so Catholic. In hockey, I know. As I'm writing this, I kept thinking, whoa, that's so Catholic. I love it. There's so many things about hockey that are so Catholic, but frankly, there's so many things about all sports and all activities that are terribly, terribly Catholic. It's beautiful. But hockey is great because now we have the major and minor, and you go to the box. In hockey, one of the slang terms for the box is the sin bin. Come on, right? That's ours. I love it. And the other thing is, when you go to the box, you make your team play shorthanded. That doesn't really happen in a lot of other sports, that you make your team play shorthanded. But in hockey, you do, which is, again, utterly Catholic. When we're not in a state of grace, we make the team, the mystical body, play shorthanded. Now, when you're at the Gopher games, when the penalty is over, the announcer says the Gophers are at full strength, and the crowd yells back, They always were. Oh, how much more Catholic can it get? Tell me there's not religion in the schools, right? It's hockey. It's our secret weapon. Anyway, the Gophers are at full strength. They always were. I told a priest friend of mine this once, and he said, yes, that's it. Say it again. The Gophers are at full strength. They always were. Yes, that's confession. That's exactly it. When you go to the box, you go in with a sin and you come out without one. And God has forgiven you, and his forgiveness is infinite. And so, in a sense, it's as if you've never sinned, because his forgiveness is infinite. It's wild, right? Now, the temporal consequences might remain. Just like in hockey, you've either killed off the penalty or you've been scored against. And so you either have tired legs of the team to go deal with, the temporal consequence of tired legs of the team, or you've been scored against. It's not a small thing either. And the temporal consequence of that. But the penalty is gone, as if it never were. The temporal consequences need to be dealt with. So when Father gives you absolution, it's as if the sin never happened. But the temporal consequences remain. You probably need to apologize to someone, get a hold of a vice, right? I'm not saying I would know anybody like this. Maybe stop gossiping, right? You might need to get a hold of something that you've been doing. You had an intention, a firm desire to quit sinning. It's not good, I got done, so now I can go do more. No, it's to quit, right? So the Gophers are at full strength. They always were. When I was talking to Ashley, actually, we talked about Bishop Dudley. I dedicate my book to him along with my parents. Does anyone here remember Bishop Paul Dudley? A saint in my book. I can't officially say he's a saint, but in my book he is. I went to my first adult confession to him. I'd been away from the church for 17 years, and I led a terrible life. And he said to me at the end of the confession, Alyssa, imagine the rejoicing in heaven today for one sinner coming home. And then as I was leaving, he stopped me right in the doorway, and he said, Alyssa, God has forgiven you. Now go home and do the hard work of forgiving yourself. And then another priest told me, the Holy Spirit wants you to put down the broomstick you've been beating yourself up with. So I just want to stop here to say, forgive yourself. God has forgiven you. Forgive yourself. And I also want to say, put down the broomstick you've been beating yourself up with. How do I know? I'm your sister. I know this. It's what we do. Put down the broomstick you've been beating yourself up with. It's very hard. And if you pick it up again, tell yourself, oh, not today. Don't worry about it. Forever I'm putting this thing down, because it never works to say forever. Right? I have no willpower for that. But for right now, today, I'm putting the broomstick down. The grace is right now, today, I'm putting the broomstick down. I'm not going to beat myself up. And then I love that I'm speaking to the mothers, and they're taping me to speak to the fathers for next week. The reason I can't talk to them is I'm going home to make sausage with my parents. And nothing stands in the way of that. So forgive your spouse. Whatever it is. For the ladies, forgive him. Even if he doesn't go to confession, forgive him. And for the men, go to confession. Forgive your wives for whatever it is. Teach her how to put down the broomstick she's been beating herself up with. You may then as well. Put down the broomstick. Then, for all the parents, I have a mission for you. Teach your children how to forgive each other and how to forgive themselves. We have forgotten today that there is sin, So we never get to the part of grudge holding and this beating up on myself. If we pretend there's no sin, then no one can have offended me. There can be nothing done to me. In hockey, there's right and wrong. That's why you get a penalty and you go to the box. It's so simple. In life, there's right and wrong. And teach your children, one, that there's right and wrong. Two, that they need to forgive. One, and they also need to, I love what I said, 2, 1. Anyway. That they also need to apologize. And they need to learn how to put down the broomstick they've been beating themselves up with. And they need to put down the broomstick they've been beating their siblings up with. And let's go further. Teach them contentment. You must teach them to be content. It usually involves the word no. May I have, no. 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 Why? But everybody else, no. No. We have to tell them no. You can give them a reason no. The reason might be, you know what, I will be held responsible for your soul. And I'm sure you don't want me to have to go to my maker and say, well, I just didn't have a backbone. Well, my kid, he pushed. You want me to be able to meet my maker and say, I did the best I could. And so right now, the decision might seem unreasonable, but it's the decision I have discerned. And no is the answer. You must teach your children to be content. And it usually means putting things aside or not gaining more things. They won't be content if they have everything they want. Okay, back to sin. Did we leave sin? I don't think so. The Gophers are at full strength. They always were. Imagine the day if just your parish were playing at full strength. If nobody were out of a state of grace. Imagine. Imagine if just this deanery or just this archdiocese, one day as Catholics we played at full strength. Be transformative. Imagine if the world, one day, all the Catholics in the world played at full strength. Everything is different that day. Nothing is the same. And it's all better. So if you need to go to the box, go. Don't carry sin around with you. One of the most beautiful things about hockey is there's no unresolved sin. Because you sin right now, you're going to the box. Whoops, I said I wasn't going to touch it. You sin right now, you go to the box. No one in hockey says, God, thank you for pointing out that I have a sin or I have a penalty. That is so good of you to point that out. I'm really grateful you're here as the ref to point that out. Frankly, the crowd points it out as well. But I have decided I'm just going to save up all my penalty time and I'm going to do it once during Lent. What are you talking about? If you don't do your penalty time when you have a penalty, then you're out of the game. You're out of the game. If you have a sin, don't carry it around. Why? What's the point? Does it prove something about you that you carry your sin? No. Give it to the church. Go give it to Father. Keep him so busy in the confessional. I'm telling you that this parish, every parish would be better if our priests were busy in the confessional. They gain graces from your confession, your full, big confession. Your weekly confession. They gain graces. Don't keep those graces from him. Right? Keep him busy in the confessional that he doesn't even have time to worry about whether the parking lot is plowed. Let other people take care of that. Don't let him be an administrator. Keep him busy. Let him stay close to the sacraments. How does he do that? Because we have to go give him our sins. And then we don't have to carry him around anyway. It's extraordinary. If you're not at full strength, go to the box. There's nothing. people, well, I feel like I'm at my worst in the box. You're not at your worst in the box. You're at your worst when you're sinning. You're frankly at your best when you're in the box, because you go in humility, in private, in utter secrecy, in the seal of the confessional. And you are there meeting Christ. And you're telling him, I'm sorry that I'm a sinner. That's the best. It's not the worst. And then you meet mercy. Even if your priest is a lion at the pulpit, he's probably a lamb in the confessional. You meet mercy and you leave without the sin. The church is at full strength. She always was. Imagine that day. It's so remarkable. All right. Things that we never do in hockey. If my kid is playing hockey, but they're kind of okay, they're in 9th grade, they're on the JV team or whatever, okay, they're pretty okay, decent, but they're never going to make the high school team. So really, this is their last year, the formal touch, the formal teaching of hockey. This is their last year of that formal teaching. And we're hoping, let's just call the kid Susie. We're hoping that Susie stays faithful to hockey, that she keeps coming back to hockey for the high school games. We really want Susie to go to a college with hockey, maybe the Gophers. I am a Gopher fan, full disclosure. Anyway, so we want Susie to go to the Minnesota Gophers and be able to go to those games. And we're kind of hoping that she maybe meets a nice hockey sort of a fellow, and they could get married, and they could have those sticks up the aisle. No, don't even mention that to Father. He's not going to go for it. So no sticks. But anyway, we want her to marry this nice hockey fellow, and maybe they can have little hockey players, and they might even coach someday, the little one. And they're so just stinking cute as they're trying to balance on those skates, and when they're 5 or whatever, the Cubs. And so we want her to remain faithful forever. So let's not tell her about high sticking. What? Well, we want to remain faithful, and high sticking is kind of a controversial call. And so the way we found out is that if we don't tell them about high sticking and remain faithful, no, they don't. No, they aren't. They're not going to remain faithful. If you don't teach the kid fully at their age level what the rules of hockey are, they're not going to remain faithful. They'll feel like an idiot. You didn't tell me about high sticking. I just jabbed this guy in the head. I got a penalty, and I was out of the game. Why wouldn't you tell me that? You're my coach. You're my parent. You're supposed to tell me. Why didn't you tell me? Well, we want you to remain faithful. It's kind of a hard teaching. No, you know what's hard about it is the consequences of it when I don't know it. That's what's hard. There's no hard teachings in hockey. Why? Because we stack them up from the time they're little. For example, the helmet. Let's go back to that. Now, put it on, kid. It's part of the uniform. That's what you tell a 5-year-old. You don't need to tell them anything else. Maybe you have a kid who's really interested in engineering and they want to figure out how the helmet fits and all that. Okay, so at their age level, you teach them about that. It has to do with the brain. Here's a hard teaching. Checking checking into the boards, right? So we can check at a certain age into the boards, but you don't let your 5-year-olds check into the boards because they don't know how to even hold their head as they're going toward the board. Now you have teenagers, and now they're going to be taught how to take a check. And part of it is as you're skating toward the boards, your head has to be up in order to protect your spine. That's why you don't let people check from behind. You're seeing the check come in from your peripheral vision, and so you hold yourself a certain way. We don't give that to 5-year-olds. Why would we? They can't comprehend all that. That's too much. That's your goal. Go shoot something into that goal. That's what we teach them. Get up. You got to get up again, right? Keep getting up. Oh, hold on to your stick, right? That's what we're teaching them. But as they get older, we stack up the teachings, and we don't hold back teachings in hockey. That's why there's no difficult teachings in hockey. It's the same in the faith. None of the teachings of the church are difficult. We make them difficult by holding them back. And ninth grade, for example, it's usually a time to get into all the life issues in a big way, right? We teach our 5-year-olds and little kids that these babies are beautiful. Let's make some blankets for some babies, right? All these nice things. But probably by ninth grade and confirmation, it's time to talk about the big stuff. Well, when we hold it back, that becomes a difficult teaching. If we're not convicted ourselves, that's a difficult teaching. If you need to learn more, learn more. Which brings me to adult catechesis in hockey. I have a friend. Her name is Melissa Halsney. I love to share her whole name just to embarrass her, even though she's not here. But she did not come from a hockey family or even a sporting family, if we want to have a moment of silence about that. But she did marry this guy who played hockey in high school, and then they had hockey kids. And she didn't know a thing that was going on in hockey. And so she decided that she would join the mom's hockey league because she couldn't see the puck. Nothing, right? And she didn't know it's just a clump of kids skating back and forth, and there's guys with their arms moving in funny ways that are supposed to mean something, and then there's these sticks, and why do I have to buy another one? And why do I have to get the skates sharpened? So she joined a mom's hockey league. Not because she had some big dream, oh, finally I'm fulfilling my dream of dragging my middle-aged, bad-kneed, arthritic body onto a sheet of ice on these crazy shoes with blades. Right? Are you kidding me? It's as thin as a blade. Oh yeah, it is a blade. And I'm supposed to skate. That wasn't her dream. She dug into the teachings of hockey in order that she could better be a part of her children's lives of hockey. Better be a part of the conversation at the dinner table. Better be a part of watching the Gophers and the Wild on TV. Right? Better be a part of the whole family conversation around hockey. Okay, I had a friend once who is a hockey mom, and she said to me, Alyssa, the difference between hockey and the Mass is that hockey is fun. Wow, I wonder if the Mass can ever come back from this. I hope the church knows we're in big trouble here. Yeah, it's super fun. Hockey is super fun. I'm not denying it. It is cool. I love watching it. But it's not cool to grandma who's never been catechized in hockey. Then it's just a hard bench in a cold place. That's all it is. How much longer? Oh, I can't believe it. Okay, what am I supposed to do here? Watch number 7. Okay, I'm watching 7, so where'd she go? Grandma doesn't know about lines changing. Are you kidding me? She's on the bench? How did she get on the bench? Right? Okay, well, just watch the puck. I can't. It's too fast. I can't see where it's going. They ought to make it bigger and a brighter color. And then she hears the buzzer go off, and first that gives her a start, and she's like, oh, it's over. No, that was the end of the first period. Right? And then there's all these, she knew, of course, you stand at the opening hymn, and that is a joke, by the way. Just waiting for someone to get it. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Okay, it's the Star Spangled Banner is the opening hymn. Everybody knows to stand for that. Come on. Right? Maybe "Oh Canada" if you're in the right spot as well. And so, of course, she knows to stand for that. But then there's all these responses, the sitting, standing, leaning in, flipping your head back like that. Right? There's all this stuff like groaning, cheering. And as soon as everybody else is standing up, as soon as she's figuring out, oh, I should stand up right now, everybody else sits down. Are you kidding me? What is this about? And then she says to someone, isn't this a little dangerous? Is that kid bleeding over there? And the guy behind her says, it's not hockey until someone bleeds. Grandma can't figure it out. This is just awful. It's a hard bench in a cold place, and they give her this brown liquid cardboard to drink, and they call it hot chocolate. Come on, it is not hot chocolate. No, unless you're at a Gopher game or a Wild game, it's hot chocolate, but not the high school games. It isn't. Anyway, and there's no back support, by the way. At least, at the better games, you get back support. At the Wild, you do. Okay. So hockey is fun unless you're not catechized in it. Then it's just a bunch of kids moving around in a clump, chasing something that you can't see. There's some guys in funny outfits moving their arms around. It's supposed to mean something. So the difference between hockey and the Mass is hockey is fun. Not if you're not catechized. Guess what? If you don't think the Mass, I don't know that we think it's fun. But if you're bored at Mass, if you are bored at Mass, I'm not talking about your kids. If you are bored at Mass, you don't know enough about the Mass. You should be weeping by the time the processional is finished. The walk that Father takes is from the Nativity to the crucifixion. Incredible. That's just the first walk. He's walking from the Nativity to the crucifixion. You should be weeping. The altar servers are there to remind you of the saints and angels. You come in not during or after the processional. You come in early because Father is Christ. He's in the person of Christ. And he completes the processional of all of us coming from all over the world. And the Mass happens in and outside of time. So the Mass here is just an icon of the Mass around the world and the Mass all over time. So even though you're just coming from your neighborhoods, but really it's everybody coming from all their neighborhoods all over the world and all over time, all the saints, all the souls who died faithfully, all meet at the Mass. And who comes last to the Mass is Father completing the processional in the person of Christ. Christ finishes the processional. You should be weeping. If you're bored, you don't know enough about the Mass. And so what do? Just like my friend Melissa, you strap on the skates. You dig into the teaching. Well, it's not really my dream to skate on a frozen piece of ice with an arthritic body and middle-aged bad need. It wasn't Melissa's dream either, but she did it. Why? Because it's good for the family. You do it. You'll learn more about the Mass. When we look at our watches, and I'm talking to the men, when we look at our watches at Mass, we forget that generations of our family will be looking at their watches. At the baptism, we did not pray, well, I hope my child will be bored with their faith just like I am. I hope that they look at their watch thinking, how much longer can this go on? Really? Father, come on. Really? Oh, you picked the long Eucharistic prayer. That's not our prayer at the baptism. Our prayer at the baptism is for the child to live in communion with the church. The only way they'll do that is if they know their faith. How did they know their faith? You're the first teachers. You probably were the first teachers of hockey. You certainly were the first teachers of throwing a ball, brushing their teeth. Well, there could be better people to teach my children about the faith. Yeah, there could be, but you're the one right there. There's better people to teach your kids about brushing their teeth. Get a dentist. Did you get a dentist over for that? No. Here's a toothbrush. We're brushing your teeth, kid. Let me see. Let me smell your breath. You didn't brush your teeth. Come on, let's go. Right? You're the teacher. Doesn't matter that you're the best teacher or you're not the best teacher. You're the teacher. You're the first teacher. You agreed to be the first teacher at the baptism and frankly at the wedding. Check the rites book. You're the teacher. Anything that happens here with Father and any of the faith formation people is the added extra bonus. If I have your child and maybe I can get something across to them, that's the added extra bonus. But it's not my duty necessarily. You're the first teacher. It's my calling that I also teach. Right? So if the Mass is a hard, cold bench, or a hard bench in a hot place, or an overly air-conditioned place, whatever it is, I don't understand why we sit, kneel, we don't ask that about hockey. Neither do our children, because they're fully catechized in hockey. So if it is a hard bench in a cold place, then you need to dig into the teaching. Okay, Minnesota, not just the state of hockey, also the state of football. We have John Gallardi here. When we're talking about teaching, I have a friend whose son played for John Gallardi, and he was the big man on campus when he was a freshman in high school, or when he was in high school, his 4 years in high school. But he went to play for John Gallardi, and his at St. John Johnny's, right? John Gallardi, winningest college football coach of all time. And anyway, so my friend's kid went to play, but he realized in the first week of their practices that he's not going to be the big man on campus at college. There are other bigger men, and and he's probably not going to always suit up all the time on the travel games, and he's not going to start at the home games, and so on and so forth. And so a week has gone by since he's been dropped off to camp, and his parents finally are able to talk to him. And they said to him, David, how do you like John Gallardi? Well, luckily he's been able to synthesize his thoughts about John Gallardi. And he said, he's an idiot. It's so beautiful, right? The wounded pride of the 18-year-old. I'm sure that the winningest football coach of all time, college football coach of all time, and the 18-year-old, let me see who's the idiot, right? Hard to figure out, but it's wounded pride, right? That wounded pride. And we laugh at it because we've all been there. Which one of us, okay, raise your hand if you've never had wounded pride. I am the queen of wounded pride, right? So this crazy wounded pride, and he's not going to be starting. That's his big thing. So everything John Gallardi does, he's an idiot. But what happened is he still really wanted to play football. And he's at the camp anyway. And he really can't fight it. So he kind of has to join it. And so what he does is he becomes docile to the teachings of John Gallardi. Now, the thing is that John Gallardi doesn't say, boy, I just want to start with a clean tablet here and a clean slate, and so I'm not going to recruit football players because I just want everybody to know my system and nothing else. And so I'm going to get chess players, stamp collectors, ballet dancers, whatever. That's who I'm going to recruit. No, he recruits football players. He wants them to bring everything they know about football, but then to become docile to his teaching about football. And what he's going to do, even though seemingly to David, it's so stupid, I'm going to have to sit on the bench, I'm so much better than that. No, become docile, David. So then he can build you up, and he can take you much higher than you have ever been. Well, David went on to love John Gallardi, knew that he's teaching him about being a man, that he's not really teaching just football, he's teaching about manhood and how to run your life. He played for John Gallardi for 4 years and then became an assistant coach for him. Became docile to the teachings. Right back to teaching our children, teaching ourselves, digging in ourselves. That teaching of the church is difficult. It's idiotic. No, it isn't. The church isn't asking you to leave your brain at the door. The church is asking you to bring everything you have. Today, for certain, if it hasn't happened before, today I am inviting you into the intellectual part of the church. Come in. Start learning. It's an invitation. You have been invited. Everybody get it? You have been invited. Come in. Start learning. And be docile too. That doesn't mean leave your brain at the door. It means bring everything you have, but be docile to the teachings. Now, if I were asking anyone about football, I'm going to go with John Gallardi every single time over the 18-year-old. Even if I'm asking him, what does the 18-year-old think about football these days? I'm still going with John Gallardi. He knows the 18-year-old brain better than any 18-year-old. Why? He's been able to study it for, at that point, nearly 70 years. He was coach, right? So, the same thing. Every football teaching, I'm going with John Gallardi and his experience. My experience is I went to 8 years Catholic school. Too bad there's not a priest in here. It's my big joke. You got to laugh with me. I pay attention to 1 in 5 homilies. It's totally a joke. It's 2 in 5. No. Anyway, right? I have a catechism that I dust off every now and again. I have a nice, beautiful Bible. It was my grandma's, and that one sits on a really perfect shelf. And I listen to Catholic radio now and again. Oh, I'm on it. But anyway, Radio Maria. 2,000-year-old unbroken tradition handed down by Jesus Christ. 8 years Catholic school, 2 and 5 homilies, sometimes open a catechism. This is difficult teaching. I got to go with the 2,000-year-old unbroken teaching handed down from Jesus Christ through his apostles, through the apostolic succession, to our beloved Pope Francis, to the magisterium. And I have to figure out how to incorporate it in my life, to become docile to that teaching, right? If it's hard, it's worth it. It was hard for David with John Gallardi and his wounded pride, but he knew the harder it is, the better it's worth it, right? The more it's worth it. It's the same thing, docile to it. More it's worth it. Okay, we're heading to the big finish here. So it should be no surprise that all comes down to Moses, right? It's a joke. The jokes don't get better, and they won't. You could come and see me 1,000 times. The jokes aren't going to get better. They're the same worn out jokes. Anyway, it does come down to Moses, obviously. And Wayne Gretzky, don't worry. So, Moses and the Promised Land. If you remember, Moses did not get to take the Israelites into the Promised Land. Why? One act of disobedience. Right? He was supposed to speak to a rock. Instead, he pounded on the rock. And the first sin is the disobedience. The second sin, isn't that kind of a tough, that's a big spiritual Herbie, you know what I mean, if you don't get to go to the Promised Land. No, the second sin was scandal. We forget that scandal is a sin. He's the leader, and in front of everyone, he disobeys the leader. That's scandal. We have got to be careful about scandal in our lives. That's all I'll say about that. If I had another hour, we'd go into scandal more. So he doesn't get to go into the Promised Land. So the last thing he does with the Israelites is he speaks to them, and it's what he says is in Deuteronomy. And I like to think of, if I had one last chance to talk to all of you, maybe we could sit around and do a crafting project or share feelings, right? But it's not that. He gives them a catechism lesson. He gives them the 10 Commandments. Again, he reiterates the 10 Commandments, and then he adds 613 on. I've heard people say 610, but I think 613 is the right number, even though I think I have it wrong in my book, oddly enough. Anyway, he catechizes them, and he talks about the law. And he says, teach your children. Deuteronomy is not Hebrew for crafting or sharing feelings. It's Hebrew for second law. He has to leave them. And so he doesn't just share feelings. He gives them the law, and he gives them even a heavier burden of law. But what is this law supposed to do? It's to free you. The more we know the rules of hockey, the freer we are to play it. The more I submit to hockey, the freer I am, right? The professionals have fully submitted to hockey. That's why it's literally, when you talk to a professional hockey player who had one of those nights where everything is just unbelievable, in slow motion, faster than ever, where every connection is made. If you talk to them about it, it sounds like a spiritual experience. Why? Because they completely submitted to the rules, and it left them utterly free. So he's giving them the rules, and he says, teach your children. He doesn't say, we're going to set up this little thing called Catechism, and we're going to have you take your kids there one night a week, Wednesday nights, 45 to 70 minutes or something, 18 times a year, maybe 20 times a year. And if Father and Gina and Pat, whoever, if they don't get it across your kids, oh, not my fault. No. He says, teach your children to the parents. And when we take a quick look through the Old Testament, every time the Israelites knew the law, everything was fine. And every time they didn't teach their children, all hell broke loose literally. Right? Teach your children. Now, let's get to Wayne Gretzky. See if I can find his quote. My first experience with a pair of skates and a hockey stick happened before I turned 3. My coach, also known as Dad, instructed me from the comfort of our kitchen while I played in the homemade rink that had once been our backyard. Dad wasn't trying to build a hockey star from our kitchen. He was only trying to stay warm. Even back then, hockey was my life. I lived, breathed, slept, dreamed, and played hockey. Who is this first teacher? Dad. Parents are the first teachers, but there is something about the father. I am speaking to the men. There is something about the father. What if Wayne Gretzky's parents weren't his first teachers? He might have picked it up down at the rink. They just weren't that into hockey. He might have picked it up down the rink. Maybe there's a rink close by where he grew up and he had friends going there. He might have picked up hockey. But what are the chances we call him the great one? Slim. What if Wayne Gretzky his mother was the first teacher and his father sat in an easy chair and had the newspaper and said, ugh, hockey's for the weak-minded. Do what your mother says now. And then when you're 16, you can pick. What if his father mocked his team wear? What if his father mocked the Stanley Cup? What if his father was just apathetic when it came to the professional teams being in town? What if his father wouldn't tithe to hockey? But his mother was his teacher. Now, what are the chances that we call Wayne Gretzky the great one? Do what your mother says now, but when you're 16, you can pick. Nothing. He wouldn't be the great one. Hockey is better for having had Wayne Gretzky. The world is better for having had your children. It is better. You have eternal souls on your hands. You must teach them. The mothers, you know who you are, right? You know that teaching is every bit a part of you, but the fathers, you must teach your children. You have to, right? Wayne Gretzky was given the Stanley Cup. The Stanley Cup is a really cool thing. He won it. Didn't he win it a few times? I don't know. There's someone who won it 10 times, and I think there's even a guy who won it 11 times. I think there's 2 people who won it 10 times and one guy who won it 11 times. I would love to be at the parade or the picnic or the party. If any of your children win the Stanley Cup, please invite me. I want to be there. I'd love to touch the cup. I think it'd be the coolest thing in the world. But there's something greater than the cup. It's the eternal crown of glory. If you win the cup, you get to keep it for 24 hours. You get a whole day with it, 24 hours. And if you loved that day with the cup and you want to do it again, it's super easy. Just win it again, right? That's simple. But the eternal crown of glory is what we really want our children to have. We want to be there when our children are handed the eternal crown of glory by the Maker. And he says, well done, my good and faithful servant. I want to be there. I want to be with you. I want to see it. How incredible. And the eternal crown of glory is given once, forever, for all time. We spend a lifetime of work trying to win the Stanley Cup. Imagine the effort that needs to go into attaining the eternal crown of glory. So, let's go back to Moses. Teach your children. But no one called me exactly to add anything to Scripture. But I'm kind of a bold gal. When we teach our children hockey, all they want is more. They want a hockey bedroom, they want a hockey birthday party, they want to play free skate, they want knee hockey, they want street hockey, they want every manner of hockey there is. They want hockey video games, they want hockey collecting card things, right? Which is really holy cards. We did that first. Just let you know, those are holy cards. Right? And that's all they want. They want more. When we fully catechize our children, have it infused in our whole life, all our children want more is the faith. Infused in everything. So, Moses says, teach your children. I say, teach your children the faith as if it were hockey. Thank you so much.